My name is Arlene. I'm 62 years old, and I never thought my only son would betray me for an apartment. I'd been living in my Boston high-rise for 30 years when Trevor looked me in the eye during my birthday dinner and said, "Mom, you've lived in that apartment long enough. Jessica needs a more deserving place." The shock of hearing my own child demand my home as a gift for his wife changed everything between us. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever had to stand up to family who took advantage of you, hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength during life's most difficult moments. Trust me, you'll want to hear how I turned my heartbreak into the most liberating decision of my life. Harold and I purchased our apartment in Beacon Hill 40 years ago, long before the area became the prestigious address it is today. Back then, we were just a young couple. Harold, a promising associate professor at Boston University, and me, a dedicated elementary school teacher. The 3-bedroom apartment was beyond our means, but Harold insisted we stretch our budget. "This will be our forever home, Arlene," he told me as we signed the mountain of mortgage papers, his eyes gleaming with pride and hope. "One day, when we're old and gray, we'll sit on that terrace and watch the sunset over the Charles River." We did eventually get to share those sunset views, though not for as long as we had planned. After 40 years of a marriage filled with love, laughter, and unwavering support, I lost Harold to pancreatic cancer 5 years ago. The disease took him swiftly, just 6 months from diagnosis to his final breath. I still remember the last sunset we watched together from our terrace, Harold's once robust frame, now frail, wrapped in blankets, despite the summer warmth. "Promise me you'll keep watching the sunsets, my love," he whispered, his hand clasping mine with surprising strength. "And remember, this home is your security. Never let anyone take it from you." At the time, I couldn't imagine who would try to take our home away. Certainly not our son Trevor, who had been the center of our world since his birth 38 years ago. Trevor had been a wonderful child, bright, curious, and kind-hearted. Harold and I had poured everything into raising him, often sacrificing our own needs and desires to ensure he had the best opportunities. We paid for piano lessons when he showed musical talent, even though it meant I took on extra tutoring jobs after my regular teaching hours. We saved diligently for his college fund, forgoing vacations, and driving the same reliable but aging car for 15 years. "Our son will have advantages we never had," Harold would say, as we carefully recorded our monthly contribution to Trevor's education fund in our budget notebook. And Trevor had indeed made the most of those advantages. He graduated from Dartmouth with honors, went on to earn an MBA from Wharton, and secured a position at a prestigious financial consulting firm in Boston. We couldn't have been prouder. When Trevor bought his first condo, a sleek 1-bedroom in a trendy neighborhood, Harold and I helped him move in. Despite having just finished his first round of chemotherapy, Harold insisted on carrying boxes. "A father helps his son build his nest," he said, waving away my concerns. Those memories make what happened later all the more painful. The changes in Trevor began subtly about 3 years ago when he met Jessica at a charity fundraiser. She was striking, tall and slender, with perfectly styled dark hair and a confident demeanor that commanded attention. But what Jessica possessed in beauty, she seemed to lack in warmth. When Trevor brought her to dinner at my apartment for the first time, I noticed how her eyes swept critically over our home. While the apartment was well maintained, with classic quality furnishings Harold and I had collected over decades, it wasn't decorated in the ultra-modern aesthetic that seemed to appeal to Jessica. "Your apartment has such potential," she said, running her finger along the built-in bookshelf that Harold had installed himself. "These pre-war buildings have good bones, but they really need updating to maximize value." I later learned that Jessica worked as a luxury real estate agent, specializing in high-end properties in Boston's most expensive neighborhoods. Everything, it seemed, was evaluated through the lens of market value. "Trevor tells me you've been here for decades," she continued over dinner. "You must have seen the property values skyrocket. This building has become one of the most exclusive addresses in the city." There was something calculating in her assessment that made me uncomfortable, but I brushed it aside. Trevor was clearly smitten, his eyes following her every movement, laughing a bit too loudly at her jokes, eager for her approval. Their courtship was brief. Within 6 months, Trevor proposed with a diamond ring that I later discovered cost him nearly his entire savings. 3 months after that, they were married in an extravagant ceremony at a countryside estate that I found both beautiful and excessive. "Isn't it a bit much?" I asked Trevor gently when he showed me the venue. "Your father and I had our reception in my parents' backyard, and it was perfect." "Times have changed, Mom," Trevor replied with a slight edge to his voice. "Jessica deserves the best. This is an investment in our social connections, too." I offered to help with the wedding planning, but Jessica politely declined most of my suggestions. When I presented her with the lace veil I had worn at my own wedding, something old and borrowed, she thanked me with a tight smile. "It's very sweet, but it doesn't really go with my designer gown," she explained, handing it back. "It's a bit dated." On their wedding day, watching Trevor pledge his life to Jessica, I felt a mixture of maternal joy and inexplicable unease. Harold should have been there, I thought, to walk me down the aisle, to make one of his wonderfully heartfelt toasts, to dance with me under the stars. Instead, I sat alone at the parents' table, surrounded by Jessica's large extended family, who spoke around me rather than to me. After the wedding, Trevor and Jessica moved into her upscale condo, which was larger and more modern than Trevor's place. They talked about buying a house in the suburbs eventually, but Jessica was adamant about maintaining a presence in the city for her real estate business. "Location is everything in real estate," she would say. "You have to live the lifestyle you're selling." I saw less and less of Trevor after the wedding. Our Sunday dinners, which had been a tradition even after Harold's passing, became monthly, then sporadic. When they did visit, the conversation invariably turned to real estate property values and Jessica's latest high-profile sale. It was during these visits that I began to notice the warning signs I should have heeded sooner. The first time I felt truly uncomfortable about Jessica's interest in my apartment was about 6 months after the wedding. She and Trevor had come for dinner, and while I was in the kitchen preparing coffee, I overheard Jessica in the living room. "This place must be worth at least $1.2 million now," she was saying. "The corner units in this building are the most desirable, and the terrace adds at least $100,000 to the value." When I returned with the coffee tray, Jessica quickly shifted the conversation, but her eyes continued to evaluate my home, as if mentally staging it for a listing. As the months passed, her comments became more direct. "It seems like such a waste for you to rattle around in this big apartment all by yourself, Arlene," she remarked one evening. 3 bedrooms for one person. Most of my clients who are downsizing find such relief in letting go of the excess space." "I'm quite comfortable here," I replied. "This has been my home for 40 years. But the stairs must be difficult at your age," she persisted, though our building had an elevator, and the apartment itself was all on one level. "And the maintenance of such a large space. The cleaning alone must be exhausting. Trevor, who once would have defended me, now nodded in agreement with his wife. Mom Jessica has a point. You're not getting any younger, and this place is too big for one person. Their visits took on a pattern. Jessica would walk through my home as if conducting an informal inspection, opening closets, commenting on the outdated kitchen, suggesting renovations that would bring the place into this century. The return on investment would be phenomenal, she would say, as if I had already agreed to sell. Marble countertops in the kitchen, opening up that wall between the dining room and living room for an open concept, replacing these old windows with floor-to-ceiling glass. You could easily get 1.5 million, maybe more. One particularly upsetting incident occurred about a year after their wedding. I returned home from my weekly bridge game to find Jessica in my apartment with a couple I didn't recognize. Trevor was nowhere to be seen. "Oh, Arlene, you're back early," Jessica said, seeming more annoyed than embarrassed at being caught. "I was just showing the Andersons the building. They're interested in the area, and I wanted to give them a feel for the units here. You brought strangers into my home without asking." I was bewildered and upset. "I have a key for emergencies," she explained smoothly. And this was a golden opportunity. The Andersons are looking in the 7-figure range, and there are no other units currently available in this building. After the uncomfortable couple made a hasty exit, I confronted Jessica. "This is my private home, not an open house. Please don't use your emergency key this way again." She apologized insincerely, but the incident highlighted a concerning pattern of boundary violations. A few weeks later, I came home from the grocery store to find Jessica alone in my bedroom with a measuring tape taking dimensions of the master suite. "Just getting some measurements," she said casually when I expressed my shock, "for when you decide to update the place. These old closets are so inefficient compared to modern systems." But I hadn't expressed any interest in updating my closets. The incident left me feeling violated and increasingly suspicious of Jessica's intentions. Trevor's visits alone became rare, but when he did come by himself, the conversation inevitably turned to my living situation and future plans. "Have you thought about what you'll do with the apartment when you can't manage on your own anymore?" he asked during one such visit. "It's a valuable asset that should be protected." "I'm perfectly capable of managing now," I replied, "and I have my long-term care insurance for the future if needed." "But the apartment itself," he pressed. "You wouldn't want it sold to strangers after all these years in the family." I changed the subject, but Trevor's fixation on my apartment had become unmistakable. The most direct approach came about 2 years after their wedding. Trevor visited alone one evening, bringing an expensive bottle of wine and my favorite dessert from the bakery down the street. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with our wine, he broached the subject I had been dreading. "Mom, Jessica and I have been talking," he began, his voice carefully casual. "We'd like to buy the apartment from you. That way, you wouldn't have to worry about money for your retirement or care needs, and the apartment would stay in the family." "Buy it." I was taken aback. "Trevor, I have no intention of selling my home." "But it makes so much sense," he insisted. "We could offer you $600,000. That would give you plenty for a nice 1-bedroom in a retirement community with money left over for your living expenses." $600,000 for an apartment worth at least twice that in the current market. My own son was trying to lowball me out of my home. "The apartment is worth considerably more than that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Trevor had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Well, we thought since it's family, and since you'd be helping us get started, The price could reflect that. Plus, you wouldn't have to pay a real estate commission or go through the hassle of listing it. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'm not ready to sell. This is my home, and I intend to stay here as long as I can. Trevor's expression hardened slightly. Mom, you need to think practically. What happens if you fall, or if your health declines? This place could become a burden very quickly. I'm in excellent health, I reminded him. My doctor just gave me a clean bill of health at my checkup last month. That can change quickly at your age, he persisted. And then, what? You don't want to be forced to make decisions in a crisis. If that time comes, I'll address it then, I said firmly. But for now, the apartment is not for sale. Trevor left shortly after his disappointment and frustration evident. For the first time, I found myself locking the door behind him and wondering if I should change the locks. In the weeks that followed, both Trevor and Jessica became more persistent. There were frequent calls about checking in that inevitably turned to discussions of the apartment. Jessica sent listings for retirement communities and smaller condos, just so you can see what's out there. Trevor began dropping comments about updating my will to reflect current circumstances. You don't want to leave loose ends, he said during one phone call. What happens to the apartment when you're gone is something we should discuss now while you're still clear-headed. The implication that my mental faculties might be in question was both hurtful and alarming. I began to wonder if this was part of a strategy to pressure me, or worse, to eventually claim I was incapable of managing my own affairs. With each interaction, I felt more like an obstacle to their plans, rather than a beloved mother and mother-in-law. My home had become a target, and I, it seemed, was merely an inconvenient occupant standing in their way. My 62nd birthday dawned gray and rainy, matching my mood as I prepared for a day I expected to spend alone. In the years since Harold's passing, birthdays had become quiet affairs, usually marked by a phone call from Trevor, perhaps lunch with a friend, and an evening spent looking through old photo albums, remembering happier times. This birthday felt particularly poignant. At 62, I was now officially a senior citizen, according to most definitions. It was the age Harold had been when we'd planned our retirement travels, plans that cancer had cruelly interrupted. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, allowing myself a moment of melancholy as I pictured the adventures we would never share. The morning passed without a call from Trevor. I tried not to feel hurt. He was busy with his career, his marriage, his life. Still, a simple happy birthday mom text would have taken only seconds. Around noon, my phone finally chimed with a message. It was from Trevor. Mom, Jessica, and I want to take you to dinner for your birthday tonight. Our place, 7 p.m. We have something special planned. My spirits lifted immediately. Perhaps I had misjudged the situation. Maybe they had been planning this surprise all along, which explained Trevor's lack of a morning call. I responded with enthusiasm, thanking them for the invitation and confirming I would be there. The rest of the day was spent with renewed energy. I washed my hair, put on light makeup, and selected a flattering navy dress that Harold had always loved. I even splurged on a taxi, rather than taking the T, not wanting to arrive windblown or damp from the persistent drizzle. Trevor and Jessica lived in a luxury high-rise in Back Bay, their 12th floor apartment offering spectacular views of the city. The doorman greeted me by name. I had been there enough times to be recognized, and directed me to the elevator. Jessica opened the door at my knock, looking stunning as always, in a crisp white blouse and tailored pants that probably cost more than my entire outfit. "Arlene, happy birthday," she said, accepting the cheek kiss I offered without returning the gesture. "Trevor's just opening some wine." Their apartment was immaculate, as always, decorated in the minimalist modern style Jessica preferred. Everything was white gray or black, with the occasional pop of color from an abstract art piece. There were no family photos, no mementos, nothing that told the story of who lived there. It always struck me as more like a magazine spread than a home. Trevor emerged from the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, giving me a quick, one-armed hug before handing me a glass. "You look nice." We sat in the living area, making small talk about the weather, Trevor's work, and Jessica's latest real estate successes. I waited for them to bring out a cake, perhaps sing "Happy Birthday," or give me a card or gift, but the conversation continued to revolve around their lives. "Shall we move to the dining room?" Jessica eventually suggested. "Dinner should be ready." Dinner turned out to be takeout from an upscale restaurant already plated on their wedding china. It was delicious, some kind of glazed salmon with roasted vegetables, but lacked the personal touch of a home-cooked meal. Still, I expressed my appreciation, determined to enjoy this rare evening with my son. As we ate, the conversation took a turn I had come to dread. "So, Mom, how are you managing in the apartment?" Trevor asked, exchanging a glance with Jessica. "Any issues with maintenance or the stairs?" "I'm managing perfectly well," I replied, setting down my fork. "The building management takes care of any maintenance issues, and as you know, there's an elevator. But living alone at your age has other challenges," Jessica interjected smoothly. "Security concerns, isolation, the burden of cleaning all that space. I have never felt unsafe in my building. I have friends I see regularly, and I manage the cleaning just fine," I said, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. "I've lived there for 40 years, Jessica. It's my home." "About that," Trevor said, setting down his wine glass with a deliberate motion. "Jessica and I have been thinking about the future. Your future and ours." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. This didn't sound like birthday wishes were forthcoming. "What about it?" I asked cautiously. Trevor leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mom, you've lived in that apartment long enough. Jessica needs a more deserving place." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me." Jessica jumped in her voice, smooth and practiced. "What Trevor means is that the apartment would be perfect for my new real estate office. The location is prestigious, the space is ideal, and it would give my business the boost it needs to reach the next level." "My home," I said slowly. "You want my home for an office. It makes perfect sense," Trevor continued, as if we were discussing something as mundane as a restaurant choice. "You're getting older, the place is too big for you, and Jessica could really use the space professionally. We thought it would be the perfect birthday gift," Jessica added, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You signing over the apartment to us? We'd handle all the paperwork, of course." I set my napkin down beside my half-eaten dinner, suddenly understanding that this was no birthday celebration. This was an ambush. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice remarkably steady, despite the anger and hurt churning inside me. "You invited me to dinner on my birthday to demand that I give you my home as a gift to you, not demand, Mom." Trevor backpedaled slightly. "Suggest it would benefit everyone. We've even found the perfect place for you." Jessica slid a glossy brochure across the table. "Golden Sunset Retirement Village. Its upscale has a full range of amenities and offers graduated care options as your needs increase." I didn't touch the brochure. And how exactly would I afford this retirement village? We'd help with the costs, of course, Trevor said magnanimously. The apartment would more than cover it. So I give you my $1 million+ apartment, and in exchange, you'll help with the costs of putting me in a retirement home. I clarified, wanting to be absolutely certain I understood their proposition. When you put it that way, it sounds so transactional, Jessica said with a small laugh. We're family. We're just trying to find the best solution for everyone. The best solution for everyone, I repeated. Or the best solution for you, Jessica. Trevor's expression hardened. Mom, be reasonable. You can't live in that apartment forever. Sooner or later, you'll need assistance. We're just trying to plan ahead. On my birthday, I added. You chose my birthday to tell me you want to put me in a home and take my apartment. The timing is coincidental, Jessica said dismissively. We've been meaning to have this conversation for a while. I pushed back my chair and stood up. I think I should go now. Mom, don't be dramatic, Trevor said, rising as well. We haven't even had cake. You bought a cake? I asked, genuinely surprised. Jessica had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Well, no, but we can order dessert if you'd like. No, thank you, I said, gathering my purse and coat. I've lost my appetite. At least take the brochure, Jessica insisted, pushing it toward me again. Look it over. The virtual tours on their website are really impressive. I left the brochure on the table. I'm not interested in a retirement village. I'm perfectly happy in my home. This isn't just about your happiness, Mom, Trevor said, his voice taking on an edge I barely recognized. It's about being practical, being fair to Jessica and me. We deserve a start in life too, and that apartment would make a huge difference to our future. Your father and I gave you every advantage, Trevor, I said quietly. We paid for your education, supported your ambitions, celebrated your successes. We never asked for anything in return except your love and respect. One of those seems to be in short supply tonight. This isn't about respect, he protested. It's about what makes sense financially and practically. Happy birthday to me, I said softly, and walked to the door. Mom, don't leave like this, Trevor called after me. At least think about our proposal. I turned at the door. Oh, I'll think about it, Trevor. I'll think very carefully about what happened here tonight. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I felt a curious mixture of hurt, anger, and something else, a creeping fear. The way Trevor had spoken, the entitled expectation in Jessica's eyes, it made me wonder what they might do if I continued to refuse their proposal. The thought of my own son potentially becoming my adversary over my home sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the rain that had begun to fall more heavily outside. The doorman called a taxi for me, and as I waited under the building's canopy, I glanced up at the lights of their apartment, visible from the street. In that moment, I felt more alone than I had, even in the darkest days, after Harold's death. At least then, I'd had Trevor by my side, the son I thought I knew and could trust implicitly. Now, I wasn't so sure. The taxi ride home felt interminable as rain pelted the windows, and my mind raced with the evening's events. The driver attempted small talk, but eventually fell silent when my responses became increasingly monosyllabic. Lady, you okay? He finally asked as we pulled up to my building. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just a difficult evening, I managed, fumbling for my wallet. Well, happy birthday anyway, he said, noticing the small happy birthday gift bag I'd left on the seat. A token from my dental hygienist earlier that day. Hope tomorrow's better. In my apartment, I moved through the familiar rooms like a sleepwalker, turning on lights, hanging up my damp coat, going through the motions of returning home while my mind struggled to process what had just happened. The living room, where Harold and I had spent countless evenings reading together. The kitchen, where we'd danced while waiting for the kettle to boil. The terrace, where we'd watched fireworks over the Charles on summer nights. This wasn't just real estate. It was the physical embodiment of our life together, and my son wanted me to sign it over as a birthday gift to his wife. I sat heavily on the sofa, suddenly exhausted. On the coffee table sat a framed photo of Trevor's graduation from Dartmouth. Harold and I flanked him, our faces radiant with pride. Trevor's smile was wide and genuine, his future bright, our family bond unquestionable. When had that changed? When had the son who once brought me breakfast in bed on my birthdays transformed into a man who would try to manipulate me out of my home? On that same day, sleep eluded me that night. I paced the apartment, remembering. Here was where Trevor had taken his first steps, clutching the edge of the coffee table. There was where he'd built elaborate Lego structures, his small face intense with concentration. The spare bedroom had been his until he left for college. The walls once covered with posters of bands and sports figures I could never keep straight. Every corner held memories of the family we had been. The sacrifices Harold and I had made for Trevor's future seemed to parade before me in vivid detail. The summer vacations we never took because that money went to his college fund instead. The second car we decided against so we could afford the private school that would give him better opportunities. Harold taking on extra classes and summer teaching to pay for Trevor's semester abroad in London. Me tutoring after school hours to cover the cost of his first car, a modest but reliable Honda that he'd complained wasn't as cool as his friends' vehicles. We had never resented these sacrifices. They were made with love, with the belief that we were investing in Trevor's future, in his happiness. Never once had we considered that these investments might be tabulated, that our generosity might someday be repaid with demands for more. As dawn broke over Boston, casting long shadows across my terrace, I found myself at Harold's desk in the small room we'd converted to a home office after Trevor left for college. The desk drawer contained important documents, our will's insurance policies, the deed to the apartment. Harold had been meticulous about financial planning. Always know where you stand, he'd say. Knowledge is security. I pulled out the latest statement from our investment account, now my investment account, and reviewed the figures. Between Harold's life insurance, his pension, my teacher's retirement, and our modest investments, I was comfortable, but far from wealthy. The apartment fully paid off represented the bulk of my net worth. If I gave it away or sold it at the deeply discounted price Trevor had earlier suggested, I would be putting my financial future at risk. If my health did decline and I needed extensive care, I could find myself without resources dependent on Trevor and Jessica's continued goodwill, a commodity that suddenly seemed in questionable supply. My phone rang at 8:30 a.m., startling me. It was Trevor. "Mom, did you get home okay last night? You left so suddenly." "I got home fine," I said, my voice neutral. "Good, good," he replied. "Listen, about our discussion. I know it came as a surprise, but I hope you'll give it some serious thought. Jessica has already started drawing up plans for the office renovation." His presumption took my breath away. "Trevor, I haven't agreed to anything. I know, but once you've had time to think it over, I'm sure you'll see it makes sense for everyone." His voice had that cajoling quality I recognized from his childhood when he wanted something he knew I might be reluctant to give. The retirement community really is excellent. Some of Jessica's clients' parents live there and love it. I'll need time to consider all my options, I said carefully. Of course, he agreed readily. But we should move forward fairly soon. Jessica has clients lined up who are expecting her to open her own brokerage, and the apartment location would be perfect. I understand, I said, though what I understood was far more than he realized. I'll let you know when I've made a decision. Great. I knew you'd be reasonable once you'd slept on it. Oh, and happy birthday again. Sorry we didn't get to finish celebrating. After hanging up, I sat motionless, the reality of my situation sinking in fully. Trevor wasn't going to let this go. And based on Jessica's previous boundary violations and their joint pressure tactics, I feared they might take steps I hadn't considered. What if they tried to claim I was becoming incompetent? What if Jessica used her emergency key again? This time to bring in contractors or begin moving my things. What if they escalated their pressure to coercion? For the first time, I felt genuinely afraid of what my own son might do. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone again and called one of the few people I knew would understand and could possibly help Margaret Chen, a retired family lawyer who had been my friend since our children attended the same elementary school. Arlene, is everything okay? Margaret's voice was concerned. It's not like you to call so early. I'm sorry for the hour. I apologized. But I need your advice. It's about Trevor and my apartment. I explained the situation. Jessica's growing interest in my home. Trevor's attempts to convince me to sell or give it to them. And finally, last night's birthday ambush. Margaret was silent for a moment after I finished. This is very concerning, Arlene. Unfortunately, I've seen similar situations before. Adult children sometimes develop a sense of entitlement to their parents' assets, especially when there's valuable real estate involved. What should I do? I asked. I don't want to believe Trevor would do anything drastic, but I'm worried. You're right to be concerned, Margaret said gravely. When money and property are involved, even good relationships can sour quickly. I think you should speak with a specialist in elder law and estate planning. I can recommend someone excellent, Stephen Goldberg. He's handled cases like this before. Do you think it's that serious? The thought of needing legal protection from my own son was almost too painful to contemplate. I hope not, Margaret said gently. But it's better to be prepared. And Arlene, change your locks today. If Jessica has been using that key without your explicit permission, that's a violation of your privacy and property rights. After getting Stephen Goldberg's contact information, I called a locksmith who came that afternoon to change the locks. It felt like a drastic step, but Margaret's concern had reinforced my own growing unease. The following day, I met with Stephen Goldberg, a kind but no-nonsense man in his 60s, with steel-rimmed glasses and a reassuring air of competence. Mrs. Wilson, based on what you've told me, I'm concerned about potential financial elder abuse, he said after hearing my story. It hasn't crossed that line yet, but the warning signs are there. Financial elder abuse. I repeated the term, sounding far too dramatic for what I was experiencing. Trevor is my son. He wouldn't. Many perpetrators of elder financial abuse are family members, Stephen said gently. It often begins with pressure about living arrangements or suggestions about helping with financial matters. The victims frequently don't recognize what's happening until significant damage has been done. He outlined my legal options and the steps I could take to protect myself. Your apartment is solely in your name, correct? And there are no liens or encumbrances. That's right. Harold and I paid off the mortgage 15 years ago. Good. That gives you complete control over what happens to it. Now let's talk about your will and other estate planning documents. By the end of our meeting, I had a clearer understanding of my legal position and a plan beginning to form. But the emotional reality that I needed protection from my own child was still difficult to accept. As I left Stephen's office, my phone rang again. It was Trevor. "Mom, Jessica and I were thinking of stopping by tonight to continue our discussion about the apartment. Would 7 work for you?" "Actually, Trevor, I've made plans for this evening," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "And I'm still considering my options. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk further." "What kind of plans?" he pressed. "Maybe we could join you." "Just dinner with a friend," I said vaguely. "Which friend?" His suspicious tone struck me as inappropriate and controlling. "Trevor, I don't question your evening plans. Please extend me the same courtesy." "I'm just concerned about you, Mom. You left in such a state last night, and now you're being evasive." "I'm not being evasive. I'm setting a boundary. I'll call you when I'm ready to discuss the apartment further." I ended the call, feeling both empowered by my small act of resistance and deeply sad that it was necessary. The son I had raised would never have questioned my dinner plans or pressed me after I'd clearly stated I wasn't ready to talk. This new Trevor, influenced by Jessica's ambitions and perhaps his own materialism, was someone I barely recognized. Over the next few days, Trevor called repeatedly. Each time I politely but firmly told him he was still considering my options and would contact him when I was ready. Jessica sent texts with more retirement community brochures and links to articles about right-sizing in your golden years. I left most unanswered. Meanwhile, I was quietly taking action. Following Stephen's advice, I contacted Sarah Lynn, a real estate agent recommended as someone with integrity and discretion. Unlike Jessica, Sarah specialized in helping seniors transition to new living arrangements with dignity and care. "I'd like to sell my apartment," I told her during our initial meeting, "but I need the process to be confidential for now." Sarah nodded understandingly. "We can list it quietly. No public open houses, only private showings with pre-qualified buyers." "But may I ask why the need for secrecy?" I explained the situation with Trevor and Jessica. "I understand completely," Sarah assured me. "Unfortunately, I've worked with several clients in similar circumstances. We'll be extremely discreet." With Sarah's guidance, I began the process of preparing my apartment for sale. It was emotionally challenging to sort through 40 years of memories, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to discard. Each item seemed to hold a piece of my history, with Harold, with Trevor, with the life we'd built together. The china cabinet Harold had refinished as an anniversary gift. The collection of seashells from our 20th anniversary trip to Cape Cod. Trevor's childhood artwork, carefully preserved in portfolios. Each required a decision, a letting go. I worked mostly when Trevor was likely to be at his office, not wanting to risk him dropping by unexpectedly. When he called, asking to visit, I made excuses. I was going out, I had a friend coming over, I wasn't feeling well. "Mom, you've been avoiding us for 2 weeks now," he said during one call, frustration evident in his voice. "We need to resolve this apartment situation. Jessica has investors waiting on her business plan." "I told you I'm considering my options, Trevor," I replied. "This is a major decision that affects my future security. I won't be rushed." "But you're not getting any younger," he pressed. "And frankly, Mom, If your health or cognitive abilities decline, Jessica and I might need to take more direct action to protect your interests and assets." The thinly veiled threat sent a chill through me. "Are you suggesting you'd try to take control of my affairs against my wishes?" "Of course not." He backpedaled quickly. "But, as your only family, we have a responsibility to make sure you're properly cared for if you can't make sound decisions." "My cognitive abilities are perfectly intact, as my doctor can attest," I said coldly, "and I'm quite capable of making sound decisions about my own property." After that conversation, I accelerated my plans. Sarah listed my apartment discreetly as promised, and within days, we had several interested buyers. The Boston real estate market was hot, particularly for prestigious addresses like mine. Meanwhile, I began exploring alternative living options. I'd never been much for city living. That had been Harold's preference due to his work at the university. I had grown up in a small town in New Hampshire and had always missed the connection to nature and the sense of community that came with small-town life. On a whim, I expanded my search beyond Boston's suburbs to include rural New Hampshire. That's when I found it, a small cabin on 3 acres of land overlooking a serene lake. The property was about 2 hours from Boston, in a small community where neighbors knew each other and looked out for one another. The cabin itself was modest: 2 bedrooms, a spacious open kitchen and living area, a screened porch, perfect for summer evenings, and a wood stove for cozy winters. It needed some updates, but the structure was sound, and the setting was breathtaking. When I visited, standing on the dock, extending into the clear lake water, watching a pair of loons glide across the surface, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. This, I realized, was what I wanted for the next chapter of my life. Not a sterile retirement community chosen by Jessica, but a place of my own choosing, where I could garden read, watch the seasons change, and perhaps even make new friends who valued me for myself, not for my real estate. The cabin was listed at $375,000, significantly less than what my apartment would sell for. The difference would provide a comfortable financial cushion for my future needs while still leaving something to be donated to causes Harold and I had supported during our marriage. Within a month of my disastrous birthday dinner, I had accepted an offer on my apartment from a lovely young couple with a 4-year-old daughter. They loved the built-in bookshelves, the terrace view, the history of the building. Watching them envision their life in the space Harold and I had cherished brought me unexpected comfort. Our home would continue to be filled with love and new memories. The sale moved quickly, as did my purchase of the lakeside cabin. I arranged for most of my furniture and belongings to be moved directly to the new property, keeping only essential items in the apartment during the closing period. Throughout this process, I maintained minimal contact with Trevor and Jessica, deflecting their increasingly urgent requests for a meeting about the apartment. I knew the confrontation was inevitable, but I wanted all the legal details finalized before it occurred. The day after closing on my apartment sale, with the proceeds safely deposited and the cabin purchase completed, I finally agreed to meet with them. "Come to the apartment tomorrow evening at 7, I told Trevor over the phone. "We'll discuss everything then." "Finally," he sighed with evident relief. "I'll bring the paperwork Jessica's been preparing for the transfer." I didn't correct his assumption. Some revelations are best delivered in person. The next evening, I heard Trevor's key in the lock. The old lock I had secretly changed back the day before, knowing he would try to use his key rather than knocking like a visitor. After a moment of confusion and a frustrated jiggling of the knob. He knocked sharply. I opened the door to find both Trevor and Jessica standing there. Jessica, clutching a leather portfolio I assumed contained the paperwork for my apartment transfer. "Mom, your lock isn't working," Trevor said by way of greeting. "The lock is fine," I replied. "Please come in." They entered, and immediately I saw Jessica's eyes widen as she took in the nearly empty living room. Only my reading chair, a small side table, and a lamp remained. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Where's all your furniture?" "I've been doing some downsizing," I said, calmly, gesturing for them to sit on the 2 folding chairs I'd set up. "Please have a seat." Trevor remained standing, looking around in confusion. "Mom, what have you done?" "I've made a decision about my future," I said, sitting in my reading chair. "Isn't that what you wanted me to do?" Jessica clutched her portfolio tighter. "We had an understanding. You were going to sign the apartment over to us." "No, Jessica. You had an expectation. I never agreed to anything." "But where is everything?" Trevor asked again, his voice rising. "What's happening here?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been both dreading and, in a strange way, looking forward to. The moment of truth, literally and figuratively. "I sold the apartment," I said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Trevor's face went pale, while Jessica's flushed dark red. "You what?" Trevor finally managed. "I sold the apartment," I repeated. "The closing was yesterday. The new owners take possession next week." "You can't have," Jessica said, her voice tight with anger. "You can't have sold it without telling us." "I'm not required to inform anyone when I sell my own property," I said. "The apartment was mine in my name only. I had every legal right to sell it." But what about us?" Trevor stammered. "What about Jessica's office plans?" "You'll need to find another location," I said. "I'm sure with Jessica's real estate expertise, that won't be difficult." Jessica was now pacing the nearly empty room like a caged animal. "This is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Do you have any idea how much work I've put into planning that office? The clients I've lined up based on that prestigious address? I'm sorry if you made plans based on property you didn't own," I said, maintaining my calm. "That was premature on your part." "Who bought it?" Trevor demanded. "Maybe we can make them an offer, explain the situation." "The buyers are a young family, very excited about their new home. The sale is final, Trevor." Jessica stopped pacing and turned to me, her expression calculating. "Fine. So you sold it. What did you get for it? Where's the money?" The naked greed in her question confirmed every suspicion I'd had about her motives. "The proceeds from the sale are no longer your concern," I said. "Like hell, they're not," Jessica snapped. "Trevor is your only child, your heir. That money is ultimately his inheritance. We have a right to know." "You have no rights to my financial information," I corrected her. "None whatsoever." Trevor seemed to realize Jessica's approach wasn't working. He sat down heavily on one of the folding chairs, adopting a more conciliatory tone. "Mom, we're just concerned about you. Where will you live now? How will you manage?" "I've purchased a lovely cabin in New Hampshire," I told him. "On a lake. It's peaceful, beautiful, and exactly what I want for this stage of my life." "New Hampshire," Trevor repeated incredulously. "In the middle of nowhere. Mom, that's insane. You need to be near medical facilities near us where we can check on you." "The cabin is 10 minutes from a town with excellent medical facilities," I said. "And you haven't checked on me in any meaningful way in months, Trevor. Your visits have all been about the apartment." "That's not true," he protested, but weakly. "When was the last time you called just to ask how I was doing? or visited without bringing up my living situation or Jessica's plans for my home. He had no answer. Jessica had regained her composure and was now clearly shifting to a new strategy. Arlene, what Trevor is trying to say is that we're worried about your judgment. Making such a massive life change at your age, moving away from everything familiar, it suggests you might not be thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, I replied. And my judgment has been validated by several professionals, my doctor, my attorney, and my financial advisor, all of whom support my decision. You've been talking to lawyers behind our backs, Trevor asked, looking betrayed. I sought appropriate professional advice before making major life decisions, I corrected. Just as you would. This is ridiculous, Jessica burst out. You've sold your valuable apartment and bought some backwoods cabin to spite us. Well, fine. Trevor is still your heir. When you're gone, the cabin and whatever money you've squirreled away will come to us anyway. Her callous reference to my death, spoken as if she were merely discussing an inevitable business transaction, was the final confirmation that I had made the right decision. Actually, I said, reaching for a folder on the side table, that's the other matter I wanted to discuss with you tonight. I removed 2 copies of my new will and handed one to Trevor. This is my updated estate plan properly witnessed and filed with the court. You'll notice that you are no longer my primary beneficiary, Trevor. He stared at the document in shock. What? I've established the Harold Wilson Memorial Scholarship Fund at Boston University, where your father taught for 30 years. Upon my death, all my assets will go to that fund, which will help disadvantaged students pursue higher education, something your father and I always believed in deeply. You're disinheriting me, Trevor's voice cracked. Your own son. I'm ensuring my assets are used in a way that honors your father's memory and our shared values, I said quietly. Values that seem to have been forgotten in recent months. This is elder abuse, Jessica practically shouted. Trevor, she's been manipulated by some attorney who's probably getting a cut. We can contest this. We can prove she's not competent. Jessica, I said sharply. As I mentioned, my mental competence has been recently evaluated and documented by multiple professionals, specifically in anticipation of potential challenges to my decisions. Any attempt to contest my will or claim I'm incompetent would be both futile and potentially embarrassing for you professionally. Trevor was reading through the will, his face growing increasingly pale. Mom, you can't do this. I'm your son, your only child. Being my son entitles you to my love, Trevor. It always has. But it doesn't entitle you to my property or assets, especially when you've demonstrated such disregard for my autonomy and wishes. This is because we wanted you to move to a safer, more appropriate living situation, he argued, because we were concerned about you. No, I said firmly. This is because you demanded I give you my home as a birthday gift to your wife, because you threatened to seek guardianship if I didn't comply with your wishes, because you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as an obstacle to your wife's ambitions. Jessica grabbed her purse. This is a waste of time. Come on, Trevor. We need to call my cousin at the law firm. There's got to be a way to fight this. Trevor hesitated, looking between his wife and me. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the son I remembered. Uncertain, conflicted, not entirely comfortable with the path he was on. But then his expression hardened. You'll regret this, Mom, he said, standing to join Jessica. When you're alone in that cabin with no one to help you, you'll wish you'd made different choices. I've never been more certain of any choice in my life, I replied. And I won't be alone. I've already met several neighbors who have become friends. There's a book club at the local library that I've joined, and a community garden where I've reserved a plot for spring planting. Good luck with your little country fantasy, Jessica said scornfully. Don't call us when reality sets in and you need help. They left without another word, the door closing behind them with a decisive click. I remained in my chair, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful. The confrontation I had dreaded was over. My future was my own again. As I looked around the nearly empty apartment, I didn't feel the sadness I had anticipated. Instead, I felt a growing sense of liberation. This space had indeed been filled with memories, but those memories weren't in the walls or floors. They were in my heart, in the photos I had carefully packed, in the select treasures I had chosen to bring with me to my new home. What remained here was just space. The life Harold and I had built, the love we had shared, the family we had created, all of that would come with me in one form or another. And ahead lay something I hadn't anticipated finding at 62, a fresh start. 1 year later, I sit on my screened porch, overlooking the lake, a cup of tea, warming my hands against the crisp, autumn morning air. The maple trees along the shore have turned brilliant shades of red and gold, their reflection shimmering on the water's surface. A pair of loons, the same pair, I suspect, has been here since I arrived, glide serenely near my dock. The transition from city apartment to lakeside cabin hasn't always been smooth. My first winter brought challenges I hadn't anticipated. Learning to operate the wood stove efficiently, dealing with power outages during storms, navigating occasionally treacherous rural roads. But each challenge, met and overcome, has brought a sense of accomplishment and confidence I hadn't felt in years. And I haven't faced these challenges alone. My neighbors John and Alice Martin, an active retired couple in their 70s, have been invaluable friends and mentors. John taught me how to stack firewood properly and identify potentially dangerous ice dams on the roof. Alice introduced me to the joys of birdwatching in the local quilting circle, where I've made several dear friends. The community here has embraced me in ways I never experienced in my Boston neighborhood, where busy professionals barely nodded in passing. Here, people stop to chat at the small grocery store, remember my name at the library, invite me to potluck suppers and community events. When I had a minor surgery 3 months ago, I returned home to find my freezer stocked with homemade meals and my porch adorned with flowers. My days have found a pleasant rhythm. Mornings begin with coffee on the dock in fair weather or by the wood stove when it's cold. I volunteer at the local elementary school 3 days a week, helping children with reading difficulties. A return to my teaching roots that has brought unexpected joy. Afternoons might find me gardening, reading, or kayaking on the lake when the weather permits. Evenings are for phone calls with friends, community activities, or quiet reflection. The cabin itself has evolved with me. I've painted the walls in warm, cheerful colors, added comfortable furniture suited to the rustic setting, and filled the bookshelves with beloved volumes from my teaching days and Harold's academic collection. The spare bedroom has become a combination guest room and craft space where I've rediscovered my long-dormant interest in watercolor painting. Financially, I'm more secure than I anticipated. The substantial difference between my apartment's selling price and the cost of the cabin, wisely invested with the help of a financial advisor, provides more than enough income to supplement my pension and Social Security. I've even been able to make annual donations to the scholarship fund that will eventually bear Harold's name. I hear from Trevor only rarely. The first few months after our confrontation brought silence, then a few terse text messages on holidays. I learned through mutual acquaintances that Jessica's real estate business struggled without the prestigious address she had counted on. Eventually, she joined a larger firm rather than establishing her own brokerage. Their marriage has reportedly been strained by financial pressures and disappointed expectations. About 6 months after I moved, I received a formal letter from an attorney Trevor had retained, inquiring about the possibility of reconciliation and estate reconsideration. I responded through my own attorney that my estate plans remained firm, but that I was open to rebuilding a relationship with my son, independent of financial considerations. I heard nothing further for several months. Then, on a crisp autumn day, much like today, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Trevor emerged alone, looking uncomfortable but determined. He had found my address through a former neighbor, he explained, and had driven up on impulse. "May I come in?" he asked, standing awkwardly on the porch steps. I invited him inside, offered coffee, and we sat at my small kitchen table overlooking the lake. The conversation was stilted, at first, filled with careful small talk about the weather, the drive from Boston, the fall foliage. Finally, Trevor looked around the cabin, taking in the comfortable simplicity, the peaceful setting, the evidence of my new life. "You seem happy here," he said, sounding surprised. "I am," I confirmed. "It suits me in ways I didn't expect." "Jessica and I separated last month," he said abruptly. "She's filing for divorce." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I had never wished unhappiness on either of them. "Don't be," Trevor sighed. "It's been a long time coming. After the apartment situation, things were never the same. She blamed me for not handling you better." He winced at his own choice of words. "Sorry that came out wrong." "I understand what you meant," I assured him. "The thing is, Mom," he continued, staring into his coffee, "losing that apartment opportunity was just the beginning. Jessica had leveraged herself financially, counting on that address for her business. When it fell through, we started fighting about money, about her spending, about everything, really." He looked up at me, his expression pained. "She kept pushing me to challenge your will, to claim you were incompetent, to do whatever it took to secure what was rightfully ours, as she put it. I almost went along with it, but then what?" I prompted gently when he faltered. "Then I found Dad's old letters to you, the ones from when you were first married. I was looking for some financial documents in the storage unit, and there was this box labeled Harold's Papers." I remembered those letters, passionate, thoughtful missives from our early years when Harold had spent a semester as a visiting professor at another university. I had thought them lost in one of our moves. "I read them," Trevor admitted. "I know I shouldn't have, but once I started, Mom, the way Dad wrote about you, about the life you were building together, about his hopes for me, it made me see everything differently, made me see you differently." Tears welled in his eyes. He wrote about how you were the moral compass of our family, how your generosity and kindness made him want to be a better man, how he trusted you completely, with his heart, his future, his everything. I felt my own eyes filling with tears. "Your father was always a beautiful writer." "He was right about you," Trevor said. "And I've been so wrong, so incredibly unforgivably wrong. Trevor, no, please let me say this, he insisted. I got caught up in Jessica's ambitions, in the lifestyle she wanted, in what seemed like an easy solution to our financial pressures. I stopped seeing you as my mother, the woman who read to me every night, who came to every school event, who taught me to be honest and kind. Instead, I saw you as an asset, a means to an end. His voice broke. I'm so ashamed, Mom. So deeply ashamed. I don't expect you to forgive me or to change your will. I don't deserve either. But I needed you to know that I understand now how terribly I treated you and how wrong I was. We talked for hours that day, really talked in ways we hadn't in years. About Harold, about our family history, about the values that had shaped our lives before money and ambition had clouded Trevor's perspective. About his marriage and its dissolution, about my new life at the lake, about the possibility of a different kind of relationship moving forward. Before he left, Trevor noticed the loose board on my porch steps. Without being asked, he found tools in the shed and fixed it, reminiscent of the helpful boy he had once been. It was a small gesture, but it felt symbolically significant. A first step toward rebuilding something that had been broken. In the months since that visit, our relationship has slowly mended. Trevor comes up to the lake every few weeks now. Sometimes we just talk. Sometimes he helps with projects around the cabin. Sometimes we simply share a meal and watch the sunset. He started bringing fishing gear and has developed quite an interest in the sport, spending peaceful hours on my dock or in the small rowboat I purchased last spring. I haven't changed my will, and Trevor hasn't asked me to. The scholarship fund that will eventually carry Harold's name feels right. A legacy that honors the values we tried to instill in our son values. I believe he is finding his way back to now. As for me, this unexpected chapter of my life has brought gifts I never anticipated. Freedom from the expectations of others. The discovery of new interests and abilities. A community that values me for who I am, not what I own. The quiet confidence that comes from standing up for oneself and creating a life of one's own choosing. Sometimes I think about that birthday dinner a year ago, the evening my son demanded I give up my home as a gift to his wife. At the time, it felt like the most painful betrayal imaginable. Now I see it differently. That painful moment forced me to evaluate what truly mattered to me, to envision a future of my own design rather than one dictated by others' expectations or conventional assumptions about aging. Had Trevor and Jessica not made that demand, I might still be living in that beautiful but increasingly empty apartment, surrounded by memories, but disconnected from new experiences. Their attempt to take what was mine ultimately led me to discover something more valuable. The courage to begin again on my own terms, at an age when many believe new beginnings are no longer possible. The loons are calling to each other now, their haunting cry echoing across the water. Soon, they will leave for warmer waters as winter approaches, but they'll return in spring, as they have for countless years before I arrived, and will continue long after I'm gone. There's comfort in that continuity, in being part of something larger than oneself, in finding one's place in the natural order of things. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you, or found yourself starting over at a time when others thought you should be slowing down? Let me know in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more tales of resilience and renewal. And if you know someone facing similar challenges with family or major life transitions, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone gives us the courage to take that first step toward change. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, it's never too late to rewrite your life's narrative. The pen is always in your hand, no matter your age or circumstances. I wish you the strength to use it wisely and the courage to begin your own new chapter whenever you need it.